All right, so we're ranking the top 10 running backs in the 2025 NFL draft today. Um, in my opinion, a lot better of a draft class as far as running backs go compared to last year, without a doubt. And honestly, the more and more I started looking into the running back class, the better it got, to be honest with you. A lot of the players that are hyped up early on in the draft, I don't think are necessarily as good. So it was a bit disappointing. Certainly, at the very least, it is a much more top heavy running back. I think you're more likely to see one or two or three running backs go in the first round, possibly early second round, which is usually rare in this day and age for running backs. Um, but there's also plenty of depth down the line and a lot of value you can get into the fifth and sixth round. And I think that really stands out for this draft class, especially given a lot of the second and third round running backs are relatively disappointing. And you get your mixture of different types of players that you want. A lot of different power run games, a lot of speed run games, a little bit of both at times. And there's one guy who stands out above the rest. I think most people know who I'm talking about here. I've been extremely high on him since day one, as has most people. Um, Rightfully so. He's one of the, he's one of the most productive running backs in the history of college football. Um, and then that didn't give it away. Just wait till later on, and we'll talk about who that is. But there's plenty of guys also who've made their name beside him. Guys who I think can play on all three levels, which I prioritize as much as anything. Being able to break tackles, being able to play both in a power run and speed type game, and having that home run ability. And then there are guys who can break tackles at nauseum down the draft, but maybe not to the same level. But there were 10 guys that stood out. I don't think that per se that there was any controversy, although there were definitely some honorable mentions that I think are worth mentioning. Guys like Travion Henderson missed the cut for me. Jordan James of Oregon, DJ Giddens, Kalel Mullings, another guy who, but I mean, there are definitely a lot of running backs who I think can be starters, but it's these 10 guys that stand out above the rest. What I will say is that a couple names that you're probably not going to see on this list that I think are worth mentioning. Quinshawn Judkins. Yeah, just not a big fan of him. I think that he benefits a lot off of having a good offensive line. I feel like, in a way, he's kind of got worse as a back ever since he got to Ohio State. Wasn't as good at Ole Miss. He kind of got schemed a lot open due to Lane Kiffin overall, and just getting open in the pass game, being more of a dual threat. And same thing goes with Amarian Hampton. I think this is a guy who relies a lot on speed, and he's great at finding the hole, but that's pretty much it. And his change of direction is just awful for a running back. This is a guy that doesn't break as many tackles as it would seem, and if he does, they're not really that impressive in my opinion. You're talking about a guy who kind of just gets lucky with mistakes that defenders makes. Whereas these other guys kind of create their own yardage, especially. And we'll start off at number 10 for that reason. A guy who creates as much yardage as anyone is Syracuse running back LaQuint Allen, who I think, as far as power run game goes, might be the best running back in this draft. That's hard to say because I don't think, per se, he has as good home run hitting ability. Pretty much it's non existent for him. And this is a guy who doesn't have burner type speed. He runs a 4.640. But as far as receiving goes, he is amazing. As far as just being a dual threat running back, but overall, just being a big bruising running back who can still play in zone type systems and find holes. It's quite phenomenal. And then you add in his athleticism, his agility. I mean, the guy can hurdle over guys in spite of being, 6 foot, 205 pounds, which is just insane. For his lack of speed, he's still incredibly agile, gets to the ball pretty quickly. His get off, his explosiveness is great. He's got pretty decent lateral movement for his size. And like I said, he's a very good receiver at that, runs very good routes. He's also a great blocker. Obviously, his size helps in that department, and he's got great ball security, very strong. Um, Really, what it comes down to, again, the big thing is just the fact that he does not have speed whatsoever. Um, and I think that that needs a lot of, I mean, it's not going to need a lot of work because it's not something that you can really develop at the next level. But if he kind of leans in on that power run game and he gets drafted by a team that has a heavy power run game, teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, etc., I think he can be a very solid player at the next level. At the very worst, a running back too, but he can be a tail end starter in the NFL in the right system. But LaQuint Allen comes in at number 10. At number 9 is going to be Brashard Smith. I'll be honest, a running back that kind of goes against my norm as far as my own criteria as far as running backs. I'm a little bit more old school when it comes to who I think should be prioritized as far as I would draft personally. And Brashard Smith is not nearly as good as breaking tackles as any of these other guys around him. Um, he's a phenomenal receiver. I would argue probably the best receiver in this draft class, other than maybe Omarion Hampton. As far as a route runner and receiver goes, I would say he is better as far as just technical skills go. Omarion Hampton is a lot more productive as a receiver, but as far as just skill set goes and how it translates to the next level, I think Brashard Smith has the best qualities of any receiving running back in this game. He's got fantastic route running, great footwork. He's able to create separation quite like a receiver and lines up like a receiver often, so that helps. He's got the toe drag swag, as Peter Schrager would call it, and he's got great hands. Being able to kind of follow his quarterback's lead and being able to catch footballs in uncanny areas for players of his side. He's got great speed and fantastic explosiveness. As far as a guy who can just run and just outrun you, he's got 4.39 speed and he uses it well because he knows how to pursue angles. And one thing that really caught me was that really intrigued me on tape was the fact that he was as good as any player in this draft as far as being able to get to the spot that he needed to beat his defender before they did, and he did that every time. He's very consistent with that. Brashard Smith, that way, as far as just kind of raw skill, he is as good as any in this draft. For being 196 pounds and still being able to accelerate like that is nothing short of impressive, and he's great at being able to find the hole. Um, Really, what it comes down to is his frame. It kind of raises concerns about his durability. I don't really see that being a problem. He's never had injury concerns. He's a very tough ball player. We saw that against Clemson, especially. I think at times he can miss cutback options at the second level. He's not a guy, like I said, he's not a guy who just innately breaks tackles, and his ball security is very, very bad. So from that standpoint, there are some things Brashard Smith needs to work on. But when he gets a big play, he makes something out of nothing often, especially in the receiving game. And I think that could be a valuable skill set for a lot of teams. For that reason, I got Brashard Smith at number 9. At number 8, another guy who's a really good power running back, Phil Maffa, breaks a lot of tackles. Can play more as a speed running back, however, and a little bit faster than LaQuint Allen. A little bit more athletic than him overall, although LaQuint Allen, I would say, is better as far as just a leaper goes. Phil Maffa has better lateral movement and linear agility and ability to squeeze in tight spaces and make yardage. Really, when there's no way to get out of a situation in front of him, he's got a great stiff arm, as you can see in this image. But he actually utilizes it very well in the NFL. I'm not just going off the image to say that, obviously. But a guy who also is very good at hitting angles, utilizes his offensive line well, is great at being able to hit the hole. I think that really what it comes down to with Phil Maffa, my problem with him is, number one, he's not the fastest. Obviously, a 4.55 40 is not exactly the greatest. His change of direction is bad. His footwork slows down a lot before he can actually move to the other side of the field. He doesn't have per se breakaway speed. If he gets breaks tackles through first and second level, his vision kind of gets distorted, and then he just makes some very mental errors. Um, he plays with high pad level, which makes it easier for defenders to tackle him. And he's had some injury concerns. I don't think they're major injury concerns, but they definitely dropped him in draft stock compared to where I originally had him, because of the fact that he is a bruiser, so that is his game. And if he keeps having those types of injuries, that could be a problem at the next level. But Phil Maffa comes in at 8. I still think he's a solid player. Maybe not as reliant on his power game as LaQuinn Allen, but certainly a great power back in his own right, with fantastic and very surprising acceleration for his size, his build, and his speed. But at number 7, we're going to go with RJ Harvey, running back for UCF. Probably the most explosive running back in this entire draft. We talk about getting to an angle. He can do that just out of pure speed, getting to his spot. He can do that out of just pure speed in spite of sometimes having bad angles. It's not often that he has bad angles too. So, he is great at being able to anticipate what the defense gives him, where the open space is, being able to hit the hole, and then just, making something out of nothing in the second level. He breaks a lot of tackles, relies more on his speed than anything. I don't think he's at all has any sort of power run game, which kind of limits him a little bit. He runs a 4.4, which is insane for a guy who's 210 pounds nearly. And like I said, he's got great lateral quickness, got great contact balance, plays at a low pad level. He has receiving capabilities, no doubt. Great route runner and great footwork when it comes to making tough catches. Great concentration in the air. He's great with ball security. What it really comes down to is he's undersized as a running back. I think it could distort his vision, but more often than that, I think he takes a lot of big hits, and it could hurt his ability when he's playing against stronger defensive backs, linebackers, who he should be able to outrun with his size, or outmuscle with his size, or outrun with his speed. He can be a little bit too fancy out in front of the line of scrimmage, often relies on his offensive line, very much like Phil Maffa that way, and just not great as far as pass protection goes, and really didn't show any experience of being able to be a bell cow. So I think he's more limited to a role than some of these other running backs. Nonetheless, I think he's a guy who, if you have another power running back next to him, that's a great power speed type combo type duo, kind of similar to what the Giants had with Brandon Jacobs and Amon Bradshaw. RJ Harvey could very much play a similar role, even though he's a little bit more undersized. But I think very highly of RJ Harvey, and I think that certainly he deserves to be number 7. At number 6, a guy who a lot of people were recommending me watching his film. That is Corey Kiner. A guy who I was very excited and very hyped up of looking into his tape, and certainly he did not, he impressed, he exceeded my expectations without a doubt. He breaks a lot of tackles at the first and second level. He breaks a lot of tackles even at the third level, but usually that doesn't come on a full play. He really relies on being able to find his vision at each individual level, which could be a problem at times. But given his speed, I think at the next level, he should be able to take advantage of defenders who might be a little errant or time or not focusing, and take advantage of using his speed, of course. Really what it comes down to is he's got some very suspect footwork, in my opinions. He is not great as far as churning his legs. For a guy who's as explosive as he is on tape, doesn't have long speed or home run type speed per se. He plays a lot faster on tape than his 40 would indicate. And, he's very, up and down. He can't really move left and right, which could be hard against, an offensive line that kind of limits his ability to just kind of hit the hole. He's not a great receiver whatsoever, and his pass protection technique is awful. Really, what it comes down to, he's just a pure running back. I don't think that's a big problem. Like I said, I prioritize the pure running backs in that sense. Like I said, he's got great balance, great vision. He can process things right off the bat, but he does need to process at each individual level rather than kind of looking at the play as a whole general type thing. Um, and I think that he's stronger than it may look. He's he's good as far as being able to get extra yardage, fighting. He's got great ball security, and overall, I think that he has enough as far as a receiver to help as far as screen passes go, wheel route, and maybe not wheel routes, but inline routes. And for that reason, I think Kiner, he breaks enough tackles and shows enough potential to be a low end starter at the NFL level. Again, really what it comes down to why he's not any higher is just because of the speed issue. But that for that reason itself, I'm going to have at number five, I'm going to have Dylan Sampson, who, I mean, it seems like a broken record at this point. How many times I've been high on Tennessee running backs of the year? Ty Chandler, I was especially high on. He was a top three running back for me back in 2022. Of course, Jalen Wright was someone who I was extremely high on last year, being my number one running back. And then this year, of course, with Dylan Sampson, and even in 2022, we're talking about um, what's his face? I'm forgetting his face. I'll tell you his face in a sec. Um, we're talking about Jabari Small, excuse me, a guy who I was extremely high on more than most people. I think I had him as far as running back 11 or 12 when most people had him closer to running back 20. I think he came closer to running back 9 by the time the draft rolled around for me. But yeah, Dylan Sampson, very similarly, I think he's very well coached by Tennessee. He breaks a lot of tackles. He's got great vision. He sees well what's in front of him, reacts accordingly. You're talking about being able to see on the first and second level simultaneously. He's the first player that I've mentioned who has that type of ability. He can hit home run type plays if need be, although he needs his offensive, he's kind of reliant on his offensive line that way in order for that to work. He's got great speed, obviously, as most Tennessee running backs do. We're talking about a guy who ran a 4.4 240 at 200 pounds, which is very impressive. I think the big things for him is that ball security is terrible. He had 4 fumbles in 2024. You're talking about a guy who is not nearly as strong as his frame would indicate. And as far as a receiver, only has 39 career catches. Can't really catch outside his frame. So you're talking about a guy who's limited to his ability as a rusher. Definitely can do a lot after contact. Shows great patience in zone reads concepts. I think he's got great timing, fantastic acceleration. We're talking about a guy who can run 24 miles per hour, basically. And then we're talking about just overall moves and having a bag as far as running back. I think he's as good as any in this draft class. Dylan Sampson is a very flashy player. He's going to be on a lot of highlight reels, but I don't think he is the best running back in the class. I think a guy who does everything that he does at just a slightly higher level is going to be Rutgers running back Kyle Monagai, who's starting to get a little bit of buzz, but I think he should be ranked a lot higher than the consensus has him. In my opinion, Monagai is probably the best as far as being able to break tackles on the first and second level combined. He's got fantastic vision, contact balance is superb, always fighting for extra yards, stays low, absorbs hits really without losing momentum. He's got great change of direction. Really keeps a defender on stakes that way on skates. He's got great ball security. We're talking about a guy who's 5'8" and 211 pounds. Really only runs a 4.6 40. which is a huge problem. Obviously, he doesn't have long speed, but he's faster on tape than he would show. He's got fantastic explosiveness, can play on heavy workloads. We're talking about 30 touches per game. And like I said, he's fights for extra yards, is relentless. He's a great blocker. But really, what it comes down to is just doesn't have that home run speed and doesn't have that ability nearly at all to be able to run on the third level, but breaks more tackles than any player I'd say I've seen other than number one at the first and second level to that type of consistency, and is a pretty decent receiver. Where I would argue that his overall ability to break tackles puts him this high, in my opinion, even if it is limited. Three, I'm going to go with Cam Scatabo, another guy who is very slow. I think his game speed is definitely a lot faster than his overall speed. This is a guy who is a bull. Reminds me a lot of Marshawn Lynch, the way he is physical in the run game, especially in the red zone. Breaks more tackles than anybody maybe in this draft. He has home run ability, although he doesn't show it consistently, which is why I don't have him per se number one in this draft. But certainly a guy who, even with a 4.6 40, can hit the hole and just leave you in the dust. One thing I would say that is a big problem, he needs to work us on not fumbling the ball a lot. He's got 10 fumbles in his last 3 years. He's very erratic as far as his hand movement, which can leave the ball exposed. His moves can at times be a little too fancy, which leaves him vulnerable to big tackles, big hits at the next level. But we're talking about a guy who's extremely reliable and extremely efficient on key situations. Clutch, really led the Arizona State Sun Devils to the playoffs by himself and carried them. If anybody has not seen his performance against Iowa or against Texas, I would highly recommend it. Showed fantastic vision and just fantastic production overall. And in general, Cam Scatabo is just a fantastic player and definitely worth number three. If he showed more consistency as far as the home run ability, if he wasn't as reliant on his offensive line and could just break tackles overall without his offensive line's help, I would have him a little bit higher. But Cam Scatabo, I definitely think, has a borderline top round one grade, and I definitely think should be getting buzz for that reason. At number two, we're going to go with Caleb Johnson. I think the first running back who, at a consistent level, can run on all three levels, although definitely he's more reliant on being able to break tackles on those first two levels. Doesn't got per se elite running back speed, but definitely a lot better than Cam Scatabo in that sense. Whereas Cam Scatabo runs a 4.65 40, Caleb Johnson runs a 4.57. So not much difference. Caleb Johnson himself is not quite athletic, but he's also 225 pounds. So that should definitely be put into context. A guy with great vision, cuts better than any running back in this draft. And we're talking about a guy who utilizes what type of acceleration he has at maximum. He's got great burst, and when he's able to be able to hit the hole, he really doesn't look back at all. He's a great receiver on top of that. But what I would argue is that just overall, his contact balance is limited to either the first two levels and not seeing the third level, or if it is the third level, it's the fact that his offensive line helps in that thing, and he really has to just kind of move away from one tackle. There's really not much I have a problem with him. He's a bad route runner, but again, like I said, it's more about separation at that running back. If you're asking me for what I prioritize in a receiving back, and his pass protection, I think most of the players in this draft have that problem, so I really don't think it's a huge concern. But at number one, we are going to go with the guy who had mentioned a lot prior to this, the guy who I've mentioned pretty much all year, and that is Ashton Jeanty. The best running back prospect I've graded since Saquon Barkley. plain and simple. Um, this is a guy who breaks more tackles than anybody I've seen other than Saquon Barkley. His range of being able to break tackles on all three levels is superb. His ability to have both lateral side to side motion and being able to still get to his spot and being able to hit the angle and have 10 yards is insane. He disappointed a little bit as far as the 40 goes, but that's all right. You're talking about incredible burst and agility. You're talking about great footwork. You're talking about a guy who understands where he needs to be at a specific point in a play and adjusts accordingly. We're talking about a guy who's a very, very good receiver at that. Being 5'9", 215 pounds, can play both as a speedster and a power run back. Fantastic contact balance, which I already talked about. And we're talking about, very reliable hands to be able to make yards after the catch. He's got great pass protection skills. Really, what it comes down to, he's a little bit undersized. His route tree is not nearly as good as you'd want, while still being pretty effective. And his ball security can be wonky at times, but it's not a huge problem. From that standpoint, I think really those are the only concerns about Ashton Jeanty. I have nothing else other than that. I would argue that he's not nearly as good as far as breaking tackles on the second and third level as Barkley. But I mean, come on, it's Saquon Barkley. Who isn't, unless you're one of the greatest running backs of all time? A guy who can break through 7 tackles and then find the last play and just maneuver and run around them or hit an angle that they can get to in time. Ashton Jeanty is quite literally the best running back in this draft. Without a doubt, he is on a tier of his own. He is that good. His production in college has shown that, and Ashton Jeanty would fit in any scheme. And I think that pretty much every team, besides the first 3 picks, should be interested in him for that reason. Ashton Jeanty is that good. But that is my list as far as running backs go. Again, we have Ashton Jeanty at 1, Caleb Johnson at 2, Cam Scatabo at 3, Kyle Monangai at 4. 5 is Dylan Sampson. 6, Corey Kiner. 7, RJ Harvey. 8, Phil Maffa. 9, Brashard Smith. And 10, LaQuint Allen. But that is it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.